again, a major logistical place. If Pakrovsk falls, I think this will deepen the Ukrainian crisis in the remainder of Donbass, and the Russian army is getting bigger as well. The Ukrainians themselves say this, and the Ukrainians their army is getting smaller, and the Ukrainians themselves admit this. So a major crisis is building up on the front lines, and I'm focusing on Pakrovsk, but it's not like it was earlier in the war, where the Russians would attack in one place, Bakhmut, Avdiivka. The rest of the front lines would be relatively quiet, because actually the Russians are attacking everywhere else also. And again, that perhaps tells us more than anything the degree of imbalance in the military strength of the two parties. And in every place where the Russians are attacking, they're making progress, they're achieving advances. So we are looking at a major operational crisis, both in the sky and on the ground.
Yeah, so Zelensky's going to buy some time with this meeting, the negotiations, right? He's going to remove some pressure that he's getting from the Trump administration by pushing for negotiations, which is something the Trump White House wanted to do. They wanted this third round of negotiations so they can keep the deception going that there are some sort of mediators in this conflict, right? This is the theater of it all. While what's really happening is Kellogg, Zelensky, the Germans, they are planning to strike Russia, and maybe even Moscow or as deep as they can get into Russia with the Taurus missiles, or the Ukraine manufactured missiles that have to be delivered from Germany into Ukraine. Okay, the whole thing is ridiculous. I think everyone understands what these missiles are. And you even had the other day the German Major General Freuding say that Ukraine should launch long-range missile strikes deep into Russia. So I mean, everyone sees what's coming. I agree with you. Perhaps these drone strikes into Russia are about trying to identify certain areas to target, to try and perhaps drain whatever Russian air defense systems are around these targets in preparation for the Taurus-like the Taurus-like missiles, right? So what does Russia do? This is Germany attacking Russia.
Yes.
Will Russia, as they do with the United States, will Putin play along in this theater like he plays along with the U.S., that the U.S. is a mediator and they're not involved in the conflict and all of this stuff? Putin and the entire Russian administration goes along with it. Are they going to go along with this German deception?
Well, who knows? I mean, I think that a lot will depend, and again, I suspect this is true with ATACMS and Storm Shadows. A lot will depend on how effective these strikes are. If these Taurus missile strikes do actually hit targets in Moscow, start causing real damage, start killing Russian civilians, then I think the Russians will indeed start to get really the pressure in Russia to respond.
The Storm Shadows did that in the beginning.
The Storm Shadows, but I mean, they didn't do much in the way of damage.
But they did in the beginning. They did slip through. I mean, especially in Crimea, I believe
Yes, but for reasons which many people find surprising, the Russians always made a distinction between Crimea and the Donbass and those places, and pre-2014 Russia. They always said, that Crimea, Donbass, and all of those, they accept that that's a theater of war, whereas pre-2014 Russia is not, apparently. So, I mean, this is something that they made clear way back in 2022. When the missile strikes against pre-2014 Russia with the Storm Shadows and the ATACMS happened in the autumn, they proved completely ineffectual. So I think the Russians took the decision then that they were going to shrug their shoulders and let it go. Now, if it is the same with the Taurus missiles, if the Taurus missiles prove similarly ineffective, and I'm going to call them Taurus missiles because, as you rightly said, that is exactly what they are. I mean, I think we should not. I mean, others can go along with this pretense, but there's no reason for us to do so. If these Taurus missiles are as ineffective as the Storm Shadows and the Scalps and the Attackers were, then I think the calculation in Moscow will be that the best thing to do is just to brush them off, to keep doing what they're doing. They're continuing to win the war. They're advancing. They don't need to respond and escalate the situation in a way that would not be to their advantage. If the Taurus missiles do go through and do start inflicting real damage, then the pressure to respond will be very, very strong. And I noticed that Zakharova, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman, was careful to remind everybody that the Russians, that Putin has said in the past, that if missiles are launched at targets in Russia, Western missiles using Western technicians, then the Russians do reserve the right to retaliate against targets in the West. So I think that we'll see, and I think a lot will depend on the effectiveness of these missile strikes.
Yeah, so sometimes I wonder if this narrative about these missiles being produced by Ukraine in Germany to be delivered to Ukraine in order to not call them missiles is not only about providing Germany cover, but it's also about providing Russia cover, so they don't escalate against Germany. I mean, this is such a bizarre song and dance that's taking place between the collective West and Russia. It almost gives the impression of a conflict that is, to a certain level, managed.
Well, indeed. I mean,
isn't it? I mean,
well, absolutely. I mean, this is not the first time this has happened. And I give an example, which is during the Korean War. Over the course of the Korean War, the Soviet Air Force, as we now know, became directly involved. Soviet pilots and Soviet fighter jets started to engage American fighters and American fighter jets and were shooting down American aircraft. But they wore either North Korean or Chinese roundels on their aircraft. So the pretense was that they were not Russian, Soviet at all, that they were North Korean or Chinese. Everybody knew that they were actually Soviet, but everybody pretended that they were not. Of course, the fundamental difference this time, and what makes this different from every previous superpower conflict, is that we are talking about an attack on the actual territory and potentially even the capital of one of the superpowers that is involved. This never happened during the Cold War. In fact, I would go further and I would say that during the Cold War, it was unthinkable. It was unthinkable that the United States would have countenanced missile strikes against Moscow. And it was unthinkable that the Soviet Union would have countenanced missile strikes against Washington by any one of their proxies. So, this is the enormous red line that the Western powers have already conceptually crossed. Now, coming back to the fiction, whether these are Taurus missiles or not, the Russians have actually said that they're not going to go along with this pretense. The moment a missile is shot down, they will be able to tell from the components who's made it. So apparently they're prepared to go out publicly and say that these are in fact German.
Yeah, they may say they're not, though, as well, to keep the theater going.
Well,
right? I mean, it's possible.
For the moment, they are saying that they won't. Now, the other thing to say is, if they are Taurus missiles, the report I've heard is that we're talking about 150 in total. And even if they do get through 150 missiles with not particularly big warheads, are not going to do a significant amount of damage against a country the size of Russia.
I agree. But it's still crossing a red line that was unimaginable just
Yes.
3-4 years ago. And I believe Merz is ready to cross that red line.
Oh, yes, absolutely. He is.
I mean,
Clearly.
I'm just thinking about everything that you were saying. It's Germany launching missiles into Russia.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yes.
So, and I think Merz is ready to cross that red line. And I guess they've convinced Trump that this is the way to go. You're going to have the negotiations. You have Umerov, and you may want to get into that, who was going to be ambassador, and then the U.S. turned him down. So I think you have a whole distraction of negotiations and peace taking place. And I think my opinion is that a lot of this is distraction. You have this 50-day ultimatum. Now it's at 45 days or 44 days, whatever. But, what's really going on is the Europeans, and a lot of the European media is reporting this. They have managed to convince Trump to go along with their thinking on Project Ukraine, and Merz, being the most hawkish of all of them, is absolutely committed to striking Russia, the Russian Federation. I mean, he's committed to it. Merz is not hidden the fact that he wants to take Germany into a conflict with Russia. Maybe not immediately, but definitely in the future. And even NATO commanders are saying 2027 is the date that the war will break out, not only with Russia, but also with China, by the way. Anyway, your thoughts on this, so we can wrap up the video.
Merz has gone even further than you said. I mean, he's actually said that he's not afraid of a war with Russia. He said that he understands that many other people in Germany are, but he himself is not afraid of such a war. I mean, that is the rhetoric, that is the extreme rhetoric which he is currently using. And remember, I am in touch with people in Germany, and the sentiment there is doesn't share his feelings. He is having political problems in Germany, and the German elections that took place in February quite clearly show that if you're talking about younger people in Germany, they do not want to be part of this war. They're not lining up to volunteer for the German army, which is why there's talk of conscription.
Covered Iran. We talked about how whatever the effects were, I'm sorry to interrupt, but whatever the effects were, whether they were successful or not, it was a taboo that was broken.
Absolutely.
Isn't this diplomatically, geopolitically, a taboo that is being broken?
Absolutely.
Striking, perhaps going after the capital of a nuclear power.
Absolutely. Just as the attacks on, the nuclear sites at the time when the IAEA was monitoring them was a taboo. And if the United States is so reckless that it goes ahead and imposes 100% tariffs on China and India and all of the others, it's already imposed 50% tariffs on Brazil, remember, and it's making all kinds of other threats. That too, in a kind of is a violation of a taboo, because there've been sanctions and there've been tariffs, and as we've discussed in other programs, now tariffs and sanctions are being united. They're being combined together. The point is this: violating red lines in this way, in order to achieve objectives which you are not achieving, ultimately places you in a worse position. We see this with Iran, which is now saying that it's refusing negotiations, and which is in a position to continue its enrichment program without the United States knowing what's happened. And the same, of course, applies even more so with the situation in Ukraine. If you start taking this kind of approach, and that ensures that the war in Ukraine ends with an even bigger Russian victory and an even bigger Western defeat than would otherwise would be the case, that is going to have severe geopolitical consequences. And if you're going to wage economic war against the whole world, which is what the United States and the West is now doing, that too is going to have very negative consequences for yourself. So the more taboos you break, the worse your situation becomes ultimately.
Okay, what are the risks then for Russia once this taboo is broken, if this taboo is broken?
Well, the big risks and the risks that are always there is that if the Taurus missiles are launched but they fail, then they will come back to Trump and they will say to him, look, we've got to escalate. The Russians are still advancing. It's not made any progress. So let's start sending Tomahawk cruise missiles. That's where we go. I mean, that's, by the way, where the risks ultimately are. Because if you get yourself onto the escalatory escalator, as we've discussed so many times about sanctions, remember, some years ago, when the United States imposed its first trivial sanctions against China, we said that the United States was on the escalatory escalator in terms of China. And now we've seen where we are. Once you get onto the escalatory escalator, it is almost impossible to get off. I don't think Trump himself, by the way, understands that. I think he still believes that, if he imposes, if he says he's going to impose 100% tariffs on Russia in 44 days or whatever it is now. I think it's actually more like 43 days, by the way, just to say. But if he says that he's going to do that, then he can always back off. He can always wheel and deal. He can somehow talk to Blumenthal and Graham and get them to agree to pull back. That, something like that will happen. I think that he doesn't understand that people like Graham and Blumenthal are really not interested in the kind of points that he's making. I said in my program, the program I did yesterday, that he's starting to show signs of stress. I don't think he's got any major issues, but I think these swellings, I've seen this myself. I've had to deal with many people who are under stress. I've seen that, similar things, and I've seen this increasingly in signs of his increasingly strange behavior, at least some actions that he's taken, which look extremely strange to me. And I think he is under incredible amount of stress, but I think he's played this all wrong.
Oh, he's played this completely wrong. Absolutely. And I think his number one concern now is when it goes back to what you said about the Europeans bribing him or convincing him that they're going to take care of the war. I think this is ridiculous for a U.S. president to actually believe that it's the Europeans that are going to handle this conflict with Russia. I mean, the Taurus missiles need German military commanders to fire them. I mean, you need U.S. satellites and U.S. intel. And of course, behind all of this is NATO, and behind NATO is the United States. So, I mean, whatever Merz and Tusk and Macron told Trump, we'll take care of this, and Kellogg. We'll take care of this. You're just going to make money, and this is going to be a big win for America first, because you can go back to your base and say, look, I got the Europeans to pay for the weapons, something that dumb Joe Biden did not do. He was just giving away the weapons, but now we're making money on the weapons, and then there'll be a part of America first that's going to cheer, and they're going to say promises made, promises kept, and they're going to think that Trump is a 10D chess player. It's ridiculous. I mean, this is not the situation at all. It's media spin from Trump, and he's good at that. But behind whatever takes place going forward in the escalation with Russia is the United States ultimately. I think that's a correct statement to make. Whether it's Taurus, Germany, NATO, behind all of it is the United States. Their satellites, their intel,
absolutely,
their command to control everything.
Of course. And to come back to a point that we've made many, many times, we made this about the Starmer, Macron plans to send peacekeepers to Ukraine, all of that. When the Europeans, if the Europeans get into trouble, they're going to turn to the United States and are going to ask the United States to come to their rescue.